Hey there, it's Chris from Military Aviation History, and I'm here with another lesson in air power. That is, bridges are targets. Yes, indeed. Now, in the previous video, which you don't necessarily have to watch in order to watch this one, but it would make me happy, I talked about the Luftwaffe operations against Poland in 1949 and how they tried to stop Polish rail infrastructure from moving men or material from A to B, and how difficult that was and what the learnings were. And in that video, I teased about the fact that the Germans also used the Ju-52 Stuka dive bomber in this. And I imagine, I'm recording this straight after the other video, so I imagine that some of you have put that in the comments as well with a question of saying, Chris, tell me about the Stukas, what are they doing? Well, that's what I'm going to do here. So, we know from the previous video that hitting and sustaining and comprehensively destroying a rail network is incredibly difficult, because you have to keep up the attacks in order to keep the rail infrastructure down as the adversary country, in this case it was Poland, repairs it very quickly. And that of course binds forces. So you have to always think, how are these attacks actually going to be cost effective for the resources I'm putting into it? But of course the Germans don't just have bombers, which was the topic of last video, but we have the Stuka in their order of battle. And the Stutzkampf bomber is built for precision. And that offsets one of the disadvantages that the Germans had with hitting something like a rail track or even a railway station, or in fact the train in itself. But consider some of the other advantages of the Stuka as well. On the one hand side, you can then use the bombers for other operations where you need more ordnance on target, maybe a factory or something like a troop assembly area, logistical hubs, a harbor, or something like that. And the Stuka, it uses less fuel, it uses less men, and it is also able to relocate much better with the advancing army, because its requirements for basing are a lot less demanding than for bombers. And the bombs that it uses, because it's more precise, it is likely able to put those to greater effect. And as well as that, one of the problems that the bombers of course had is as they come in from low altitude, is that a lot of the bombs that had to be used to delay fusing in order to not blow yourself up or the aircraft that's behind you, bounced off because they had delayed fuses, and they bounced off from the actual railway track and then just exploded in the field near it, not causing damage to the actual railway. With the Stuka, that's not going to be an issue, because you're coming in at, from altitude, let's say 4,000 meters up, and you're dropping at 700 meters. You're going to be more pinpoint. The Stuka is built to effectively deliver a bomb within a 100 to 100 meter area. It is not as pinpoint as being able to hit individual tanks, except by sheer luck. Okay, I don't care what it says on Wikipedia. That's not what it was built for. It was built for 100 by 100 meter. So it can do that a lot more effectively than the bombers because of accuracy. And as that bomb comes in, it comes in at an angle where a bounce is very unlikely, and the bomb will burrow itself into the railway track and explode. So you could, in theory, use a kette of Stukas delivering, if we say each Stuka delivers a single 250 kilogram bomb, a kette would be 3 aircraft, sometimes 5 aircraft with bomber aircraft, it really depends. So that's 3 to 5 bombs, and that's going to be way more accurate than a single bomber dropping, let's say, 4 250 kilogram bombs on the target. And not just saying that, if you're saying the single bomber, you're not actually sending that single bomber, you're sending at least 2 or 3 or 4 other bombers with it as a formation. So you can see how cost effectively the Stuka is there. And yes, the experience reports indicated this as well. So we have Luftwaffenkommando Ostpreußen, which is part of Luftwaffe 1, was supporting Armeegruppe Nord, so Army Group North. They say, quote unquote, Stuka attacks were very effective against railroad tracks and especially against moving trains, end quote. So there's something that we don't see with the bombers. While the bombers can destroy the tracks and can destroy the trains in theory. The Stuka is actually the one that's effective. Here we can also see that because of the way that the bomb explodes, this is Lehr Division that tells us this, we have a 500 kilogram bomb that was, for example, dropped on a railway track, and it took up to 24 hours to actually fill it. So if you think again about the cost effectiveness of sustaining this, as you're using a couple of Stukas every now and then to blow holes into the railway track, that is a lot more cost effective than constantly sending bombers that are having a much harder time of hitting the target. And Fliegerdivision 1 actually concludes on the whole operations in Poland, comparing it to bomber operations, that traffic blockages on the rail network, the Polish rail network, were, quote, primarily caused as a result of Stuka attacks on open tracks, end quote. So that goes into the learning from last video as well, that you're not necessarily just going after the hubs, so the railway stations and the trains itself, but you want to destroy the network, and the open tracks of that are of course part of it. By the way, as I'm reading out these quotes, they come directly from the experience reports of the Luftwaffe, which I have pulled personally during my visits to the German military archives and to other archives as well. So if you like this sort of content and if you like these sort of learnings, do support the channel, because that goes directly into my fund that I use to research these sort of topics via Patreon and channel memberships. You can help out there a lot, and you get early access to videos as well as access to our Discord server, where we have lively discussions about air power. What is most interesting is that the Luftwaffe says that actually they have to use Stukas to get the full effect from it against bottlenecks targets. And what's a better bottleneck than a bridge? Because a lot of railway tracks are probably going to link up into a single railway track, or like 2 gauge or 3 gauge, whatever, track going over a specific bridge. So if you hit one bridge, you could potentially have ramifications across multiple different lines. So hitting that, really, really effective if you can destroy it. And that's where we are starting to see an issue. Now, the Stuka was built to destroy bridges. That was one of their primary targets in the Luftwaffe doctrine. However, let's look, for example, at what the Erste Gruppe auf Stukaskampfgeschwader 1 has to say, and that is that they attacked the bridges over the Vistula between Warsaw and Praga, as well as bridges near Modlin, Vyškograd and Plock multiple times. And during these attacks, it became clear, open quote, that it is almost impossible to sustainably destroy the bridge themselves, end quote. What's going on? What is going on? Now I'm going to put up some pictures here as well, and one of the pictures here was made on the 20th of September 1939, so roughly a week before Poland capitulated, and it shows that the bridges over the Vistula between Warsaw and Praga are still standing. Praga, by the way, very easy to identify because of that harbor area there. Now, as the Germans were pushing towards Warsaw, they actually stopped attacking these bridges. Why? Well, part of the encirclement, of course, means that you're trying to attack the city from all sides, and actually a bridge is needed at that point to be able to cross it over the Vistula. So they didn't want to destroy it at that point anymore. However, at the opening stage of the invasion, they certainly hit it because, of course, Warsaw is the hub, and a lot of military orders and a lot of military material is going to be sent from Warsaw to the different front lines and back. So initially that was a target. Later on, it wasn't. And also, the Poles knew this, of course, and heavily defended those bridges. So roundabout, if you know Warsaw, roundabout where the Washington roundabout is nowadays, between that and the bridges of the Vistula, it's a very small stretch of land. It's basically from Praga down to those that roundabout. I think it's like a mile of distance, roughly 1 to 2 kilometers. You have 3 units of anti-aircraft guns that are just waiting for the Germans to show up and then, of course, shoot at them. So those bridges were not destroyed by the Germans and also not destroyed by the Stukas. Incidentally, those bridges were destroyed when the Germans retreated out of Poland, and they had a scorched earth tactic, and also, of course, wanted to deny the Soviets of using those railways, at least for a given time, and they blew them up. But we're not in 1944, we are in 1939. But what is it then with the Stuka and the bridge? Why is this actually more complicated than you'd expect, considering that the Stuka was built to destroy bridges? Well, Luftwaffe 1 tells us that, open quote, the effective limit of the Stuka is reached when attempting to destroy heavily built bridges of any kind. Even direct hits to these structures do not cause them to collapse, end quote. So, next to the heavy construction of these bridges, we have to think about how does the bomb interact with the bridge. From an aiming standpoint, a bridge is long and thin, which means that even a small margin of error can cause the bomb to veer off target, and then you're hitting the water. At that point, you're going to do absolutely no damage to the bridge, even with a heavy bomb like a 500 kilogram bomb. But more specifically, if you think about the bomb interacting as it hits the bridge, especially because you have these truss or arch bridges, the Germans actually say that the bombs bounce off the arches. They hit the truss, similar to the problem I talked about with the bombers, where the bombs bounced off the railway tracks and exploded in a field. Well, here they bounce off a truss and then fall into the water or explode harmlessly off the bridge, not causing any significant damage. And beyond that, there is over-penetration. As you're coming down with that Stuka, taking aim at a bridge, you're building up a lot of momentum, and you're transferring that momentum by the point you're releasing the bomb into the bomb, and that strikes then the target with a lot of kinetic force. And since some of these bombs were using also delay fuse, but even without a delay fuse, what can happen is that it penetrates the bridge, it comes out the other end, and then explodes into open air. And again, that's not going to cause any issue. And the Germans say, hang on, we have made so many holes in these bridges, but no damage, because the hole that they've made is basically just a bomb size hole. It's not the explosion size hole. So that's problematic. So what did the Germans do instead? Well, they have tactical learnings from this and say, well, turns out if a bridge is heavily constructed, so it's not like a pontoon bridge, but it's actually a really solid metal or stone construction, then using bombs on it is not going to work. So let's focus our efforts on the bridgeheads, so where the bridge connects with land. Because then you can prevent access to the bridge. You don't have to destroy the bridge, you can prevent access to it. And it also has the advantage that you don't actually get into problems by yourself as you destroy the bridge and then suddenly your own troops want to cross it and you have to rebuild it. That's problematic. And actually that's something that the Stuka runs into, the Luftwaffe via the Stuka runs into multiple times. Because even in Poland, I think, was it one of the Panzer armies, I can't remember which one it was. Was it 14th Panzer or 12th Panzer? One of them. Stukas were attacking the bridge that the Panzers were crossing. And it's the only bridge that was in an area. And that caused a lot of upset between the Heer and the Luftwaffe, because you can imagine that the Heer wasn't happy that the Luftwaffe A attacked the only bridge in the area that they wanted to cross, and B, in the moment of crossing with your elite units. So not good. So there we go. You're wanting to attack the bridgeheads. Now, an interesting thing here is, and this goes into how the Luftwaffe and how the German armed forces in themselves behaved in Poland, and is that they really didn't care about collateral damage. They really didn't care about civilian targets. And specifically what they are saying is that one way of destroying access to the bridges is not just like blowing up the parts that lead towards the bridge, like the streets or the railway tracks, but actually, why don't you just blow up the houses that are on either side of the street or on either side of the railway track? In a city, that's possible. And then the rubble is going to come collapsing down on this access point, and it's just going to take a significant amount of time to clear. And then you just do it with another stretch of railway track a little bit further ahead. I mean, from a military standpoint, you can see where they're coming from, but it just gives you an idea of what the Luftwaffe was doing in Poland, and which is something, of course, that we can probably talk about in a future video as well, because there are so many experience reports about attacking Polish cities, Polish towns, and so on, and what the effect was that the Luftwaffe wanted to see from that. And sometimes they didn't want to see an effect, they just dropped bombs. This video complements our learnings from the last video in saying that taking down railway tracks and a railway infrastructure is incredibly hard. But if you have a specialized tool that is able to more precisely leverage a limited amount of ordnance in a pinpoint way to destroy a certain target, a certain bottleneck. Apologies for that noise that you may or may not have heard. There's construction nearby. How rude of them to interrupt my conclusion. Funnily enough, they're actually repairing a railway track that's nearby. The irony. What was I saying? Oh yes, so the learning here is cost effectiveness, okay? You want to be able to use a limited amount of your force in the most pinpoint manner possible to destroy access to certain bottlenecks in the enemy's rail infrastructure in order to A, not lose too much resources as you're doing this, and B, hit them where it matters most. And then you sustain that, and then you don't have to invest resources here and there to attack stations, to attack trains, to attack railway lines on open ground. If you just get the bottlenecks, you can have you can achieve a similar effect. Of course, all of this also comes with your ability to identify these bottlenecks. So you need reconnaissance, you need to build up an understanding. How is the adversary moving their troops? How are they moving their material? What importance does certain linkages in their force actually hold for the big picture? And it's never just about that single Stuka attacking that single bridge. It's way more than that. But that is me finished on this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed this sort of video, please let me know in the comments below. Put feedback, put criticism there as well. You can also add things, of course, to the discussion there. Maybe you know of some other operations that were very similar in nature on the German side, on the Allied side, from different conflicts perhaps even. And a big thank you also to all the channel and Patreon supporters for, well, allowing me to do this research, because I go to the archives, I pull these files, and then I bring them all to you. And of course, patrons and channel members have early access to all videos. So if you're into that sort of stuff, check out the description below for some links to support the channel. And as always, have a great day and see you in the sky.